It is interesting to note how the letter which I ask you to read is in fact seconded by the preface to the reader. And now I'd like to focus commenting on the methodological doubt and skepticism employed by Descartes. The overall structure of Descartes' plan in the Meditations includes three distinct parts. In order to establish the knowledge of epistemically certain ground, Descartes believes that he must first go back to the beginning, find a way to destroy the old edifice of knowledge, resecure the foundations of knowledge on rational grounds, and then start to rebuild a new edifice of knowledge that will have throughout its principles and conclusions the same epistemic certainty as mathematics. Descartes, in the first meditation, so there are technically 6 meditations, as you can see in the synopsis, where he provides very good summary, abstract of the text. But I will begin with the first meditation of those things that may be called into doubt. Here, Descartes proposes to raise, to burn, sunugin, the old edifice of knowledge, not one brick at a time, but with a heavy-duty demolition ball. He considers a single source of doubt that, if it were to prevail, would plunge us deeply into universal skepticism. By overturning the strongest possible basis for doubting the evidence of the senses, Descartes believes he has shown that perception can afford the same high degree of epistemic certainty as the strength of the reasoning by which the basis for doubt was imagined and disarmed. Descartes' strategy, and it's worth emphasizing, is to tear down the old system of knowledge and replace it with science based on mathematically certain, clear, and distinct perceptions. He argues that his own existence is not subject to doubt, even by the most powerful doubt-casting possibility. From the contents of his own thoughts, together with principles of what he calls light of nature, or lumen natural, which he mentions in Meditations 2, I think. I think he mentions it very clearly. I just need to be reminded where it is. But if I'm not mistaken, it should be in Meditation 2. He then proves the existence of God as our perfect, truth-loving creator who has faultlessly designed the equipment by which we perceive the world. If these momentous inferences are correct, then Descartes will have attained his goal of proving that knowledge, even the everyday perceptual knowledge we ordinarily believe ourselves to possess, can have the same high degree of epistemic certainty as a mathematical proof. No atheist, he believes, can demand a higher standard for philosophical or theological argument. The most important metaphysical questions of religion will thereby be settled from the standpoint of pure reason, reflecting on the epistemically certain existent contents of thoughts. Descartes thus accords the same high degree of epistemic certainty to all experiential knowledge that is generally expected to apply only in mathematics. If his project is successful, he will have extended the possibility of attaining the same degree of rational epistemic certainty that characterizes mathematics to all of science or natural philosophy, philosophical theology, and even philosophical psychology. Descartes, accordingly, and here we begin with the meditation, with the first meditation, titles the first meditations of those things that may be called into doubt, of those things that may be called into doubt. He considers virtually all of his beliefs as belonging to one encompassing category, including those he acquired through sensation and those he has uncritically absorbed as part of his education. He begins with an autobiographical statement of what he now takes to be his youthful naivete concerning the beliefs he acquired during the first years of study. He immediately goes beyond the faulty theories of phenomena that he might have been wrong to accept to the much more general philosophical problem of whether or not we can believe anything that we learn through perception about the presumed outside world. He opens Meditation 1 with these words. It is some years now since I realized how many false opinions I had accepted as true from childhood onwards, and that whatever I had since built on such shaky foundations could only be highly doubtful. Hence, I saw that at some stage in my life, the whole structure would have to be utterly demolished, and that I should have to begin again from the bottom up if I wished to construct something lasting and unshakable in the sciences. But these seemed to be a massive task, and so I postponed it until I had reached the age when one is as fit as one will ever be to master the various disciplines. Hence, I have delayed so long that now I should be at fault if I used up in deliberating the time that is left for acting. The moment has come, and so today I have discharged my mind from all its cares and have carved out a space of untroubled leisure. I have withdrawn into seclusion and shall at last be able to devote myself seriously and without encumbrance to the task of destroying my former opinions. This is an astonishing declaration and one worth considering in detail as a clear announcement of Descartes' starting place. The beginning remarks have somewhat the tone of a philosophical confession. Descartes confides in the reader that in the past he has accepted many beliefs that he since has come to recognize as false, and that it seems reasonable to infer that he must have built many false opinions on the weak foundations of even more basic falsehoods. He invokes an architectural metaphor when he says that he recognized the need to burn or raise his previous beliefs, to demolish his previous beliefs. This is the phrase used in building when one says of an unsafe building that it must be demolished to the ground, so that we can begin again with a more secure groundwork. What other course could a sane person follow when a building has faulty foundations and its superstructure is in danger of collapsing. The wise policy is surely to knock down the old building and start all over again, after providing a sound foundation on which to rebuild. That is what Descartes says he recognized the need to do with respect to the beliefs he had accumulated throughout his life. He further explains that because of the sheer magnitude of the task, he had hesitated to undertake the undoing of all his previous beliefs because it's massive, and the providing of a new, more secure foundation for knowledge. He waited, he postponed it until the opportune time where he was able to master various disciplines and he postponed it to do what he deemed necessary to rethink all of his prior presumed knowledge. He has waited, he says, until he believed himself to be of such an age that he could no longer postpone the project with any prospect of successfully completing it within his remaining lifetime. What Descartes does not say is that by waiting until the time of writing the meditations, or at least until he began to reason through its principal themes, he had a chance to discover and perfect the methods he had successfully used in mathematics and science. Descartes writes his methodological treatises after the early part of his most productive career, when he had already made significant contributions in mathematics as well as science. The implication is that Descartes developed his method on purely rational grounds many years earlier during a cold winter's retreat when he was still a soldier with a unique opportunity to withdraw from the activity of the world and simply think, quite similar to Socrates, in fact. An anecdote surrounding Descartes' discovery of his method helps to illustrate the difference between reason and perception that pervades his philosophy. When still a young man, Descartes, like most of his well-born contemporaries, trained as a soldier. He enlisted in the private army of Maoris of Nassau and saw action in the 30 Years' War in Europe between Protestants, largely from Sweden and North Germany, and Catholics, primarily from South Germany. Descartes probably did not engage directly in the conflict, but took the opportunity to travel with the army as part of his education. During one such campaign in Prussia, during a blizzard, Descartes is supposed to have bivouac in a cottage in a medieval style bed in an opening in a wall enclosed with a heavy curtain and heated by a fire on the other side of the wall. Descartes shut himself off from the rest of the world under his blankets in an otherwise very cold room. As the title of his treatise suggests, Descartes was free to meditate on the problem of the nature and limitations of knowledge and the doubtfulness of everything he believed himself to know until that point. He took the opportunity to devise a plan for the improvement of the sciences that would be based on pure reason in such a way as to avoid the uncertainty of experiential knowledge as it is usually understood. The image of Descartes, absorbed in philosophical meditations about the nature of knowledge, quickly becomes the dominant theme of his most famous work. In several places, Descartes describes himself as involved in reflections on philosophy and science in a sequence of 6 days. That explains to you why it looked like 6 meditations. We know, however, that Descartes wrote and rewrote and labored heavily on the meditations over a period of 8 years. Moreover, Descartes was so concerned about the reception of his book, particularly in light of the difficulties encountered by Galileo in his confrontations with church authorities, that he took enormous care not to offend against the religious establishment. To improve the final statement of his argument, he also circulated copies of his text to many of the leading intellectual figures of the day for their comments and criticisms, which he then published in an expanded first edition of the work along with his replies. The copy that you have in front of you, this Oxford copy, carries that also. The compilation of the text itself with objections and replies makes an effective rhetorical statement of the main thesis of Descartes' treatise. It anticipates many of the criticisms that other readers are likely to want answered, thereby strengthening the force of Descartes' conclusion by solving certain problems in advance. As Descartes undertakes the general destruction of his former opinions, he stands in need of an effective method. He explains that he was unable in one stroke simply to discard all his beliefs as false. For one thing, he does not yet know enough if he is going to question his beliefs, even if to know that his prior opinions are false. Some might be true, others false, and he will have to decide which are which. At this stage of his inquiry, he is no more in a sound position to be able to discredit that is able confidently and definitively to affirm any of his previous beliefs. What then is he to do? Descartes thinks that it will be good enough in lieu of finding that all his beliefs are definitely false, merely to find a strong reason to regard them all as doubtful. Further, he remarks that he has no need actually to proceed one by one through all of his beliefs and find a motivation for doubting each individually, which he explains would be a difficult and potentially inferior infinite labor. Instead, he proposes to find a single justification for doubting the basis for his previous belief. If he can undermine the foundation of his knowledge, it will bring down the entire edifice. Let's read this section. To this end, however, it will not be necessary to prove them all false, a thing I should perhaps never be able to achieve, to refute everything one by one. But since reason already persuades me that I should no less scrupulously withhold my assent from what is not fully certain and indubitable than from what is blatantly false, then in order to reject them all, it will be sufficient to find some reason for doubting each one. Nor shall I therefore have to go through them each individually, which would be an endless task. But since once the foundations are undermined, the building will collapse on its own accord, I shall straight away attack the very principles that form the basis of all my former beliefs. So Descartes was actually saying, in this process, of doubting. I'm not gonna doubt everything I know one by one. I only need to provide one justification for doubting, and then everything, the entire edifice of knowledge, will fall. Let's look at that if Descartes will succeed. If this is clear, please press next. If not, please listen to the video again. Thank you.